Good morning, UUCQC.
Good morning.
All right, and lively on this beautiful Sunday morning. It's great to be with you. I'm Reverend J. Wolin, and I just want to, this time in the service, we always like to highlight one particular program of the congregation, but we have two announcements about it. I know many of you have been wondering, we've been searching for a director of religious education, and I'm just thrilled to announce that we have hired one of our members, Aubrey Ryan. Aubrey, if you're here, can you stand up? And so please give her your support. And now, Melanie Landon.
Hi, I'm Melanie, and I am a member of the Religious Education Committee, or team, working with the children. And I left my script at home, so bear with me. I'm hoping I remember everything I want to say. The Religious Education team has been trying to fill in since Sarah and Becky left. And during the interim, we'll be helping out to get Aubrey up and running, and so that she knows everything we do. So the first event that we're planning, which is an annual event that the church has, that the RE committee is in charge of, is we used to call it Hanging of the Greens, and now we've kind of switched it to Festival of Lights. And it's Saturday, December 2nd, and it's open to the whole congregation. The timeline is set up so that at 4 o'clock, we're going to have crafts downstairs for the children. At 5 o'clock, we'll have an all-church dinner. So we actually have leftover hamburger and cheese from our tacos, and we're making enchilada casseroles. So what we'd like you to do is join us and bring either a salad or dessert. Then at 5:30, we're coming up here, and Justin's going to play Christmas carols, so we can do some singing. And at 6 o'clock, we'll have a special visitor from the North Pole join us. And so it should be a very fun day and intergenerational, and we're inviting all of you to come. Now I do need a few volunteers to help. We need a couple more people that are willing to do a table to work with the kids downstairs, a couple more crafts. We need people to come at 4 o'clock. The tree is going to be done earlier in the day. Some people have volunteered to come in, so that will be set up. What we need are people to hang the lights in the sanctuary. And then I have to leave at 6 o'clock that day, and so I need some people willing to step up to do the cleanup. So please see me after church to fill in those spots. Can you think of anything else we need, Diane? I can think that there are half of our committee, the Religious Education Committee, the team, is made up of people who haven't had kids in RE for 20 years. So I'm really asking also, so for some of the parents to join the team, because we may be out of new ideas, you know, and and it would be really nice for those people who have parents in the RE program to join the team and help make some decisions.
It really is a lot of fun. That's why some of us have stuck around
That's
for
right.
20 years.
Yes, yeah, because it's really a great way to get to know some of the parents. So, yeah, it is fun. Thanks.
Our opening words today will be a responsive reading, number 568 in the gray hymnal. I'll have the words up here on the screen as well, by Marge Piercy. Connections are made slowly. I'll give you a moment to get there for those who want the book. Connections are made slowly. Sometimes they grow underground. More than half a tree is spread out in the soil under your feet.
Quietly, as you were firm
fight persistently as the creeper that brings down the tree.
Spread like the swash plant that overruns the garden.
Gnaw in the dark and use the sun to make sugar.
Need real connections, create real nodes, build real houses.
Live a life you can endure. Make love that is loving.
Keep tangling and interweaving and taking part in a thick and rambled wilderness to the outside, but to us interconnected with rabbit runs and burrows and lairs.
Live as if you like yourself, and it may happen.
Reach out, keep reaching out, keep bringing in.
This is how we are going to live for a long time, not always.
For every gardener knows that after the digging, after the planting, after the long season of tending and growth, the harvest comes.
And now let us have the harvest of spirit as we light our candle. Let it be a symbol of the light of growth within each one of us. Please join me in the words of the chalice lighting that are in your order of service. In the light of truth
And in the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, and to inspire.
Good morning. I'm Bill Roba, and I've been a member of the church since the 1970s. And for the last year, I've been working with the Archives Committee every Wednesday night from 6 until 7:30. And many of you, I think, have seen the insert each week which focuses on an aspect of the church's history. As we're working this year on a sesquicentennial, 150 years of Unitarian and Universalist churches in this region, and sometimes that's a little overwhelming. But our committee has had great help from Katie Reinhardt, who's the professional archivist for the church. We've had a number of volunteers. I'm just one of many, but we could certainly use other volunteers for the last 6 months of our sort of team effort here. And I'm happy to announce that we've launched an archives blog, which you can get to by going to the church website, choosing the About drop-down, and then Archives Team. So in the weeks to come, there's going to be a variety of material and items that you may find of interest. Using archives is important for understanding the past, the history of any institution. Sometimes it's a letter, sometimes it's an actual thing. And I'd like to ask all of you this morning, when you go downstairs for your cup of coffee, your wonderful conversation, and all of that, take a look as you turn the corner from the steps and look straight ahead. Because there's something that doesn't quite make sense until you think about it. There's a large space, it's sort of oblong, it has folding chairs, file cabinets. What is it? I think most of you, with a moment's reflection, and that's what I'm doing here for 10 minutes, reflecting, you will see that once upon a time, that was a stage. And when this third church building was built, that was in the plans to have a small stage to continue what was then a long tradition of interest in plays, drama, using that as a way of focusing and approaching religion in a somewhat different way. And what I'm going to mention today actually are what I think are three dynamics in this church which have been, on a practical basis, have been used for a variety of interfaith approaches and strategy towards building a church presence. The beginning of all of this goes back into the 1870s when our second minister, Sylvan S. Hunting, was serving here. What he specifically asked the board of directors was he wanted a room that could be reserved for presenting plays and holding dances. Now, for many, churches in this area, that would be, of course, blasphemy, but not for Unitarians and later Unitarian Universalists. I will be mentioning some of our ministers, and there is a handout sheet, which I hope you got, that simply lists their names, and then they were the minister here. And if you didn't get one, you can on the way out. But I want to sort of move on to probably the most famous minister, Arthur M. Judy. He was here for 26 years. He's the one who kind of invented what this church is like, what it's about. And one of the things that is sometimes overlooked in the midst of his really interesting sermons, philosophical positions that he took in the community, but from his ministry on, the Sunday school was very important. The Sunday school, in fact, through the 1950s and 1960s, at times was quite large. And I'm not doing a statistical analysis today, except to say during his ministry here in 1895, the Sunday school had 395 children, kids, sometimes young adults, enrolled. And it must have been a pretty exciting thing every Sunday morning. What I want to suggest is this interest in plays, dramatic interpretation as a sort of extension of religious education is a first and interesting dynamic in how our church became involved in what we might nowadays call the interfaith sort of involvement with other churches. Later on, in the 1920s, Minister Kenneth E. Evans supported a drama club, which included, from that time on, non-members, simply friends, sometimes teenagers or young adults without affiliation, and it was kind of a happening place, I would say. It's Kenneth Evans who single-handedly wrote a pageant to celebrate the 300th anniversary of the landing of the Pilgrims at Plymouth Rock in 1920. The next minister, Lewis Crowlifer, who served from 1924 to 1931, continued to support and develop the church school, which in 1 year enrolled 410 individuals. And the drama club continued on in that time. They read, it was a reading theater, they read current Broadway plays during the church season. The reason I mention this is that I see our next minister, this is Reverend Snyder, who's not as well remembered as maybe he should, because he was the one who I think put together this dynamic with some other very good things in terms of interfaith ministry that is very important and can have some application today. It's Reverend Snyder who I think began to use this sort of interest in plays and dramatic productions as a way to connect with the geographically two closest church, Temple Emmanuel and Edwards Congregational. Those three churches, down to the present day, have worked with each other, have shared, have found a very interesting number of things that they agree upon. They may have many differences, but they have found, over the years, many similarities. And I think it's looking at Reverend Snyder, who not only supported the drama club, which became quite professional, and remember, he served during the Depression and World War II. Times were tough in the 30s, a lot of things going on in this church that people enjoyed and started to share with the two other religious centers. At the same time, in the early period when Reverend Snyder was here, Rabbi Albert Goldstein encouraged the youth of Temple Emmanuel to explore drama and created a group called Temple Readers. By the 1941-42 season, the Unitarian Drama Club was putting on current Broadway plays, including Arsenic and Old Lace, and The Devil and Daniel Webster. And those of you who remember and enjoy movies in black and white realize those movies have a kind of, there's a religious theme involved in a very interesting way. And so this is how it could fit in and extend what the church was doing. It's in this period of time of the 1940s that there was a kind of informal competition, and each year one of the three religious centers would be awarded a traveling trophy when their dramatic group put on the best play. Very informal, non-competitive, of course, but something to encourage people to turn out for it. One thing Snyder did was, and became very well known, he had great community connections, and he expanded in the area of reviewing books in print, but also adding an annual series of book discussions. Open to the community. They were held down in a building that no longer exists, the Lindahan Club, but it's right across the street from the Dillon Fountain, which does still exist. This was a big deal. There were hundreds of people who would sign up, primarily female readers, female audience, and looking over the list, particularly in the 1940s, for sure, Reverend Snyder would choose one or two books, nonfiction or novels, which were very obviously religious in orientation, and with thinking about the World War, he included books on Buddhism, on the Far East as an area of interest. It was open to the entire community and seems to be a classic method of uniting in a certain area on a common goal with people from other faith communities. Now the second dynamic, I want to mention, there's only three, but the second one was pulpit and crossover, not membership, but crossing over from one church to the other to join in the men's organization. It was Robert Ramsey, minister from 1907 to 1911, who came up with a brand new club called the Unitarian Club of Davenport. But as Betty Gorshey has explained, our former archivist, everybody in town knew this was really the men's club. And it was apparently the hottest ticket in town to be invited as a guest or to be invited to join, and members outside of the church did in fact join. The very first speaker was a very dynamic rabbi from Temple Emmanuel. This is William Feinschreiber. He was so popular and gave such a great talk. The second meeting, they invited him to join the membership. And it's Reverend Crowlifer again who expanded this type of sharing. He invited the next rabbi serving, Temple Emmanuel, Joseph Barron, to speak in the Unitarian Church as part of an experimental Union Thanksgiving on November 24th, 1927. It was very successful. The next year, it was held at Temple Emmanuel. And the next year was the beginning of the Great Depression. And this experiment sort of was not continued at that point. In looking at the ministry of Reverend Snyder, he started experimenting, I think, from the very beginning with the two nearby churches, and this is the first time we see some connection with Edwards Congregational, with their minister, the appropriately named Robert J. Devine was the minister. In these early winters of World War II, the Unitarian men's group invited the Edwards Congregational men's group to join them. There was a father-son kind of banquet that was held every year, and this was kind of the beginning of furthering this sort of experimentation. In 1943, the former minister, Reverend Crowlifer, was in Cincinnati, was in a very famous church there. He pioneered the idea of a joint interfaith Thanksgiving service with 8 other churches, November 25th, 1943. In January of 1944, Reverend Snyder wrote in the church newsletter, quote, "Following a very excellent suggestion recently cited in local papers, we are setting up an arrangement for an appropriate service of Thanksgiving. On Wednesday evening, November 22nd, 1944, at Edwards Congregational, the 3 congregations joined together with the Right Reverend Elwood Hayes, Episcopalian Bishop of Iowa, at the Union service." So taking these different dynamics together, I think on a very practical basis, I think sometimes it depended on personality and friendship, collegial relationships, but these three churches went on to continue this to the present day. And of course, the most interesting thing, when this church was being built, Unitarians met at Temple Emmanuel and were able to continue normal Sunday worship. I think it's interesting to see how interfaith can work on a practical level, and there's some important, of course, theological, philosophical questions, but I think it's interesting to see how this Unity Thanksgiving, of course, has been continued on to the present day with these three religious centers.
And that will, of course, continue tonight at 6 o'clock. If anyone hadn't gotten that message yet, we'll be having our Unity Thanksgiving service tonight. And as well, we've added a new tradition this year. We'll be adding the Muslim community, the Quad Cities, and Metropolitan Community Church will be joining us as well. One of the ways that we interact with our community as well is by sharing our offering with a local social justice organization. 50% goes. We ask you, therefore, to be as generous as you can. You can see the order of service, who the chair of the plate is for this month. Once you've had the opportunity to donate, we invite you to come down to light a candle to mark the joy or sorrow in your life. Let this sacred time begin. Each of us comes in here with joys and sorrows in our lives. Some keep them in the silent sanctuaries of their hearts. Some light a candle to note them. Some enter them into the book of joys and sorrows. And I share those with you now. First, as noted, John King's somewhat of a joy. He is recuperating at home after his heart attack last week, and he is improving steadily. Connie Ganazzi would like to share that her mother-in-law, Joanne Ganazzi, passed peacefully after a long struggle with COPD, and she was laid to rest in Rockford on November 16th. And Velma Graham would also like to share her husband Jim is in the hospital in ICU. It was touch and go, but it appears he is improving, and she would appreciate your thoughts and prayers and any cards, but no calls, please. So let us all remember that we all have sorrows, and those we love have sorrows as well as joys. And so on this Thanksgiving weekend, let us remember to be grateful for those things that are meaningful. Spirit of life and love in which we live and move and have our very being. Let us be grateful. Grateful for this life. From birth to life to death, unknown to known to unknown. Let us embrace this mystery. Let us embrace this life and find joy in even the little things that can bring us joy, and let us be able to carry the sorrow of the pain that we have to live through in this life. Let us be grateful for it. All this we ask in your name. Amen. Nice. I love the choir with the chimes. That was a nice touch. Yeah. Thank you, Bill. Thank you. I appreciate you sharing. Bill has been a wealth of information for me as we've been celebrating our 150th anniversary this year as a congregation. Last week we spoke a bit about our multiple religious identities. And in truth, though, that is only one of our identities. we all have multiple identities. So, for instance, I'm not only a Unitarian Universalist, I also am a minister. I am white. I am cisgendered. I am male. I am from the Bronx. I am able-bodied. I am a cancer survivor. I am a parent. I'm a husband. I'm part of a multiracial family. I'm a Democrat. I have learning differences. Just to name a few ways in which I identify myself. And it's interesting, I was at a program once where they asked us to list all our identities. And then they said, one question at a time, they asked us to take away each of those identities until we were down to one of our identities. And it's interesting, I mean, they wanted us to see which one we felt we most closely identified with. And even though it was just an experiment, we all really struggled with that. No, we didn't want to cross out this one or that one because we realized that we don't want to be identified with just one part of our identities. And so, at times we sometimes feel we have to focus on just one of our multiple identities, and often it is the one that we are most under stress about. But that one identity can also be sometimes, that same identity is the one with which we gain the most strength from. So I imagine all of those multiple identities just for you, for yourself, and then just sort of expand that to everyone in this congregation, right? And think about, think about how many then identities there are. There will be some overlap in identities, of course, and in those ways often we connect, like people who identify as being in the choir, right? That's one of your identities that you connect by, right? But the beautiful and sometimes challenging thing about being in any community, even ours, or maybe especially because of ours, is that we have the opportunity to engage with people who have different identities than we do. So I can imagine people in the choir obviously have multiple identities. They have that one commonality, and maybe some others, but they have many different identities. And so from that, we can grow. Now imagine everyone in the larger Quad Cities community and all the numerous identities that exist there. And it is only through engagement with others that are different from us and that have different identities from us, that have had different experiences and context in their lives, that helps us grow by learning. And one of the unique aspects of Unitarian Universalism is that we do try to create an environment like that, right? For us to explore and to practice different religious beliefs and share them with others and as well learn from others. And this can be expanded as we go out into the world and meet others in our interfaith work. Our first principle, the inherent worth and dignity of every person, is a lot easier in theory when everybody pretty much agrees with you on everything, and a lot harder in practice when you interact with others who don't. Eboo Patel, the founder of the Interfaith Youth Corps that works towards interfaith cooperation, wrote in his book Acts of Faith, and I quote, "Religious pluralism is neither mere coexistence nor forced consensus. It is a form of proactive cooperation that affirms the identity of the constituent communities while emphasizing that the well-being of each and all depends on the health of the whole." End quote. So our religion believes we need to put our values into action. Our sixth principle is the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. And to be effective in building a just world, we will be more effective if we join with others who have shared values. Now, other religions may have very different theologies than we do, but often our principles of justice are the same, our principles of compassion are the same, and for better or for worse, we are connected to others. So let's make it for the better. Now, I was really moved by Bill's talk. He talked so much about how we used to do interfaith social and artistic gatherings. Most of our work now is, most of our interfaith work, occasionally, like tonight, we'll have a worship service together and injustice work. But I would love to see more of that artistic and connections made on a social level, because now maybe perhaps these days some of that is done more organically, like we have like the Davenport Junior Theater that I know many of our members, youth go to, and so maybe they have that interfaith environment there. But at the core of interfaith work is the building of relationships. Building of relationships is a part of each and every one of my interfaith collegial gatherings that I go to, because we cannot assume commonality. We must create it. Sometimes it is in the finding of our commonalities that we are able to build relationships. And although we are a unique religion, and we sometimes equate that with superior. And I can tell you, most religions believe they're superior. I grew up in the Jewish tradition, which taught me when I was a young child that we were the chosen people, and that we would share this wisdom with the world. But as I grew up, I found out every religion believed they were the chosen people. So we should go into this interfaith interactions with a respect for our uniqueness. We are very unique in our belief in religious freedom and religious thought, but also with a humbleness and an open heart and mind, and an understanding that all people find deep meaning in their traditions just as we do in ours. Patel goes on to say, and I quote, "Pluralism is not a default position on autopilot mode. Pluralism is an intentional commitment that is imprinted through action. It requires deliberate engagement with difference, outspoken loyalty to others, and proactive protection in the breach. You have to choose to step off the faith line onto the side of pluralism, and then you have to make your voice heard. It is easy to see the death of pluralism in the fire of a suicide bombing, but the ice of silence will kill it as well." End quote. And so communication to me is the key. I think it's probably the key to almost most relationships. Communication that allows the creation of shared meaning. Shared meaning even within our own religion, but shared meaning across religion, as well as shared meaning across cultures as well. These shared meanings are always developing and evolving and can never be assumed. They must be discovered, negotiated, and ever renewed through deepening our relationships. And this can be uncomfortable, challenging stuff. Sometimes you just have to be willing to take the first step. I am reminded of the Jewish Midrash story. So for those who don't know Midrash, it is throughout the years, Jewish leaders or teachers sort of retelling or adding in stories from the Bible that were not there, because there are many holes in the Bible, And so there's one particular story in the book of Exodus about the parting of the Red Sea as the Israelites were escaping from the Egyptian slavery. And of course, the Charlton Heston version, I don't know if anybody's seen that on TV, has the sea parting as Moses lifts up his staff. But in this Midrash story, however, when they arrived at the Red Sea, the Egyptian soldiers were closing in and Moses and his followers were stuck on the shore. It was only a matter of time before every one of them would be slaughtered, and Moses and his followers were starting to panic, and no one knew what to do. But then one man, right before the Egyptian army caught up with them, a Hebrew named Nahshon, did something unexpected. He simply walked into the Red Sea. He waded in first up to his ankles, then his knees, and then his waist, and then his shoulders. And right when the water was about to get to his nostrils, it happened. The sea parted. So sometimes the hard work of building intercultural and interfaith competencies requires us to get wet, to walk slowly at first, testing the water, and then committing ourselves fully. Even though it may shape our worldview, even though it requires some awkward moments, even though it may get uncomfortable. You know, wet clothes, I mean, it's horrible. But we have to move forward into the vast ocean of the unknown, not knowing what will happen. Because we do know if we do nothing, then we will almost certainly be destroyed by the hordes on our heels who would instill a rigid, dualistic view of right and wrong in the world that we do not agree, that our values do not share. Because the only way to part the sea to freedom from the oppressions that bind us is to have faith to plunge in and risk the comfortable for the sake of our principles. As we move forward in this world and to look to create the future we imagine, we must become more aware of the intersection of our identities. We must choose interconnection rather than alienation. We must act with the ethics of interdependence rather than the extreme selfishness of individuality. We must see how our lot is tied up with others, and none of us are just separate unto ourselves. Let us imagine creating such a world where all people live with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Let us all come together, recognizing the differences that we do have, and there are differences. And let us work together where we can. Let us see the humanity in the other. And let us have our voices heard at the table so that our values can be instilled in the world that we wish to create. May it be so. Our closing words are from the Sufi Muslim poet Ibn Arabi. My heart has grown capable of taking on all forms. It is a pasture for the gazelles, a table for the Torah, a convent for Christians, Kaaba for the pilgrim. Whichever the way love's caravan shall lead, that shall be the way of my faith. Please join me now in extinguishing the chalice, the words of which are in the order of service or on the screen. Extinguishes the flame, but not